I am Anthony Moseley, and I am the Artistic Director of Collaboration. Hello, welcome. How are we?
I am Carla Stillwell, Director, Playwright, Cultural Historian for Black Joy, and a producer, the producer here at Collaboration.
Yes, and I'm Marcus Robinson, Together Network host and member of the Collaboration Board of Directors.
This is our 27th episode of Crucial Connections, our monthly gathering around the digital campfire to cultivate our connection and personal obligation to one another. And that's exactly what we're going to do tonight.
Yeah, but before we get going with that, we want to share with you that Collaboration has hired a new executive director, Miss Saudia Davis. Saudia is my successor, and I couldn't be more excited to hand over the leadership baton off to Saudia as I move on to a role on the Collaboration's board of directors. So, Saudia, can you come up on camera and briefly say hello?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Saudia Davis. Thank you so much. It's a joy and an honor, of course, to be here with Collaboration and to serve in this capacity along with all of you.
Wow, this is the digital passing of the baton.
Big shoes to fill.
The Robinson to Davis handoff, while Stillwell and Moseley are circling the sun. I couldn't imagine working with a better 1-2 punch than you two. And Saudia, welcome to the team.
Thank you. I mean, I have been a fan of Collaboration for so many years and a supporter and a patron. And so it's really exciting to be working from the inside now out. And so, of course, I'm here, I'm happy, and I'm excited about tonight's conversation with Heather Miller.
Saudia was on WBZ Reset yesterday. She had a wonderful interview that made me cry. Luca, if you could drop it into the chat for folks and even into a Facebook comment on the live stream so people can see it. It's also at our website. And reminding me of all the times Marcus reminded me of my own humanity. And I can't wait to be in the front seat of your executive directorship, Saudia. And Marcus, we're just so grateful that you're sticking around the Together Network.
Dude, that's the one place to be on a third Thursday of the month.
Marcus, tell everybody about what you're doing at Enrich. It's so great.
Wow, I'm the co-director at Enrich Chicago, which I get to work side by side, front row seat with Nina Sanchez, just an amazing collaborator in the anti-racism space. We're working with about 108 different arts and cultural organizations across Chicago in several cohorts of leaders who are interrogating themselves and the work around anti-racism and how to really create great spaces to create art, great places to lift up art that's been left behind, artists that have been left behind, and to really focus on what matters most, our humanity.
Excellent. Saudia, thank you for joining us tonight. We know you like to light up the chat room. And, once again, the Collaboration family just totally embraces you, and we're grateful to see all the things that you catalyze in our company.
Absolutely. We're so glad you stopped by. Can't wait to see what under your leadership. Oh my. And we're inviting all of you folks out there to engage with us. You can join us by becoming a Collabor Activist member, starting at just $1 a month. And that's like $12 a year, for God's sake, to support and sustain our work to incite social change. And you'll receive a bunch of great benefits. And if you're not already a member, you just go to collaboration.org to learn more and join today. We got a link in the chat for you now. So I want to turn the mic over to my friend Carla. Produce this thing, sis.
Oh, let me produce this thing because this is an exciting, exciting evening. Tonight's show will explore the theme, Debunking the Thanksgiving Myth and Rebuilding the First Nations, with our special guest, who is a dear friend of mine, Heather Miller. Heather is an enrolled citizen of the Wyandotte Nation from Oklahoma. She graduated from Miami University with a bachelor's of philosophy and then received her master's of Native American Studies from Montana State University. Her career began for Hopa Mountain in Montana, where she helped Native nonprofit organizations develop their capacity. She then worked in Washington for the Poltech Foundation and Colorado with First Nations Development Institute, Native American foundation that worked to educate other foundations about Indian country. Most recently, Heather led Chicago's American Indian Center as their executive director, and that's where I met her when we were in a cohort together for BIPOC leaders. And it currently is working as a cultural consultant for Native nonprofit organizations. We are now honored and privileged to welcome to the digital stage the homie, Heather Miller. Hello.
It's me, Carla. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you all.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So we wanted to kick off this conversation with a question. So when we were talking about doing the show as a team, we decided to put a question on Facebook. And we wanted to ask people, what did you learn about the Thanksgiving myth or the Thanksgiving tradition in fourth grade? So this is our question we put up. And then we got some answers. So yeah, so what did you learn in the fourth grade about Thanksgiving? Before we put up some of our answers, Dr. Marcus, what did you learn in fourth grade about Thanksgiving?
Oh, you had to ask me, huh? Well, you know, you had to dress up. You had the pilgrims, the costume kind of thing, and somehow or another Pocahontas was implicated some kind of way. John Smith and all of that kind of stuff, and so it looks like people are like giving thanks for having made it through a hard year together. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Moseley, what did you learn about in fourth grade about the Thanksgiving
I feel like
holiday?
it was like the pilgrims were throwing a party and they didn't have enough corn, and so they went over and asked the indigenous folks for corn, and then they invited them over for dinner, and they sat outside and they had a big feast at a big rectangular table.
All right, Luca, throw up some of our responses from Facebook to our question. This is what people said. I have to lean in. I was taught a fantasy about brotherhood and censorship, and people were like, the killer Christopher and his homies sailed across the sea. So we learned a lot of stuff. But one of the things we don't have much of in our conversations is the perspective of Native American people. So Heather, I'm turning the mic over to you with this question. As a Native American person, what is your perspective on this time of year?
Great. I'm really happy to start with that question. But before I dive into that, I just want us to start in a little bit of a good way. And I'm just going to open with a few words in my language, and then we're going to also just talk about the folks that are living in this land. So, kwe Heather Jatsi, Yashkinotye, Wanda Ajatute, Hati no ne runo ayatara tute unditatsie equiati. And I just said, hi everyone, my name is Heather. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Wyandotte. I am a member of the Bear Clan, and I'm here in Chicago talking to you all today. Chicago is the home of the Council of the Three Fires, our Potawatomi, our Ojibwe, and our Odawa relatives. They were the ones that would have traditionally called this area home. We still have a large, incredibly amazing and diverse Native population here in Chicago, who's very active in terms of reliving or making sure that their history and their heritage is acknowledged and is practiced every single day. Native people here in the city of Chicago make up one of the largest populations of urban Indians in the entire country. We've got about 100 different tribal nations represented here, and that's pretty incredible when you think about basically the three groups that would have originally called this area home on some level, and at some point that's very much changed. And land acknowledgements, real quick, I'm just going to put this little pin in it, should always be a living and growing thing. And as we learn more about our history, you know, those land acknowledgements can also change and grow with us. But it is also really important to recognize that we have a whole history of Native folks that call this place home, that lived and still live and still caretake for this amazing land that we live on. So we're going to start.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
No problem. So now I really appreciate this conversation and I really appreciate this question. I think that even our few little answers that we received just at the start show the importance of this conversation, just because we've even mixed up our Native stories in this opening today. So we're talking about, in this brief mention of what we learned, we're combining stories from about 3 different tribal groups at 3 different times of contact. So let's just start at the beginning.
Yes.
So here's the myth. We'll start there. So the myth of Thanksgiving that we all, I think, kind of know or sort of have an understanding of is commemorating a time in November of 1621. And so we're going to start talking about a group known as the Wampanoags. This was the tribe that was living in the territory that the Pilgrims landed in and decided that they wanted to turn into their home. So that's the historical traditional territory of the Wampanoags. They're the main focus of all of this story. Now, when the Wampanoags first encounter, and the Wampanoags were one of the first groups to encounter contact too. So they've had a lot of experience with people coming over and trying to take their land and work with, or not necessarily work with them. So they've got their ways established. They've got principles, they've got rituals, they've got things that they do. So we already know the Wampanoags have a long history of being here. The Pilgrims come in, as we know, and the Pilgrims started trying to incorporate some of their traditions here. One of their traditions that they brought with them was this time of kind of a giving thanks ritual. For them, it was a very sacred time. It was a time to fast and, really to be quiet and not be really active. So it was this very holy, sacred time to the Pilgrims. So we're talking about this time when the Native Wampanoags are still trying to take their homeland, to take control of that, and to make sure that they're still maintaining their way of life. And then you've got the colonists who are trying to take them away and to remove them from their way of life. So at the same time, in Wampanoag tradition, there was a big party going on around harvest time this time. And they would organize, they'd bring family together, they would eat, they would have fun, they would party, they'd stay up all night. And one historian talks about how they really like to shoot things. They were really into shooting things. I think this is just hilarious. I can imagine this like just a fabulous party where everybody's going crazy, celebrating their community, celebrating the great harvest that they had, getting ready for winter, getting prepared for all of these things. And, you've got this other group who's just being quiet and silent and probably not enjoying all the shooting and the ruckus and the fun time that was being had next door. So, of course, there are conflicts now happening, and the colonists, the pilgrims, they start to assume that this celebration, this party that's going on, is actually a hostile and aggressive act towards them, and they didn't really like this. So as the fasting continued and, as the colonists continued to multiply and to grow, there were constant threats, there were constant attacks, there were constant wars. Specifically in 1637 and 1676, these were known, 1676 was known as King Philip's War. These were two specific conflicts between the natives and the pilgrims that really resulted in significant death amongst the native folk in the area. It's estimated that about 40% of the natives in the area actually died in these years during these different conflicts and during these different revolts, by the pilgrims. In fact, at one point during King Philip's War, the chief's son, who was known as King Philip, he got his head cut off by the colonists, and the colonists kept his head on a stake for about 10 years while it just rotted in front of their camp because they were so angry and so disrespectful to the natives and to their celebration. They wanted that gone so bad that they helped encourage natives not to do it by showing off their kill, by showing off, what they did. So we know that this is already the background of what's going on. There was no happy celebration. There was no coming together. There was no celebrating in that myth that we often heard. This was really conflict over conflict over conflict. Then all of a sudden, we speed up to civil war, and the natives have moved out. The natives have died, have disappeared a lot from that area. They've been removed. Things have changed. But in 1841, another key element of the Thanksgiving myth is put into place. So a reverend named Reverend Alexander Young decided to link three things together. So remember in that 1621 time, those pilgrims were celebrating with their fast and their time of autumn harvests. So they took that, so our Reverend took that concept. He also took that concept of the native Wampanoag celebrating and rejoicing in their party. So he took that idea of rejoicing. He took that autumn festival of harvest idea, and then he just decided he really liked the name Thanksgiving, literally just like that name. And so he tied all of those three things together and created what has now become this real myth of Thanksgiving. He created this idea that the Indians had this celebration, this giving thanks celebration. They shared with the pilgrims. They helped bring them into survival. They helped their existence. They helped them, continue their way of life. So we start establishing this myth, this narrative of how the colonists, were saved basically by the native folks. Then in 1863, here's where we get a little hometown connection. President Lincoln declared the last Thursday of November as this holiday that we now know as Thanksgiving. So again, we've got this we've got these ideas from history, and a way to help create some understanding of our past. We've got a narrative that was written by a non-native person, helping to describe this holiday. We've got a president then that declares this as a holiday, makes this an official day. And when this happens, what we're really doing at this point is we're creating the narrative of the kind of the defeated Indian or the defeated American West. So settlers are finding a way to identify with this idea of we take Indian land, we colonize it, we take it over, and that's how we continue to gain our economic livelihood. That's how we continue to build up our wealth, because we don't have to worry about those savages. We don't have to worry about those others who are less than human than us. So we start building that narrative, and that narrative then helps shape the narrative of why we take native land in this country and why it becomes acceptable to remove Indians and to kill Indians and to make sure that they're no longer in existence. So this is where we start to build that narrative. Then within this holiday and within this dialogue, we start creating this idea that because the Pilgrims were able to survive through all these encounters, they were able to befriend the Indians, they were able to survive. We start setting them up as the true founders of this country. So this helps to start create this idea around the American dream, this idea that America is a created place. So we then, as a nation, become really or it becomes a lot easier then to forget and to exclude and to leave out the history of Native peoples. It's very easy to ignore the history and the relationship that Native peoples have with the land at that point, because that doesn't matter anymore. The country has a certain founding date. And at that point, we know that's where our history starts. We don't talk about any of the other history prior to when those Pilgrims were able to forge ahead and to solve all of their problems and really found this place and give us all the access to the American dream that, we're all supposed to have. Sorry, my problems. But the other thing that this also does, I think that there's another piece that sometimes we miss here, is that as soon as we start setting up this narrative of it becomes acceptable to steal and to take Indian land, then it also becomes acceptable to start downplaying the problem with Jim Crow. It also opens us up to the beginning of the foundational role of slavery. So we start adding all of those layers as soon as we start believing in that Thanksgiving myth. So we've now said, okay, we've given settlers, we've given colonists, we've given other races the ability to come in and to dehumanize the original people of this land. We've made it acceptable to take a part of who they are, the land in particular, to turn that into a commodity, to turn it into something that doesn't have a reciprocal relationship with us anymore. It's become a way to see it as a product and therefore continue to dehumanize other people of color in order to make sure that those who are seen and set up as the founders, as the right people, for this country, so to speak, to use and abuse and to dehumanize. So the Thanksgiving myth that we've all been taught is just a continuation of the structural racism that is so evident and so blatant within our society, and what, for the majority of us, I like to think we're actually trying to fight and to figure out new ways of working within that system. So I will stop there. Carla.
Oh, Lord. I could listen to this for literally hours. Here's my question to you. We all know that things echo throughout history, right? The echo goes until we stop it. As a Native person, what is the what would you pinpoint? What would you say now Native communities need to stop this echo of oppression and degradation? Like what are the touch points that we can all get to help stop it for the Native communities and to rebuild Native communities?
That is such a wonderful question. So, really, Carla, I think what the heart of this question is asking us is, how can we all be an ally? How can we be better in terms of working in this space together? And I think attending things like tonight is definitely a first step. This is, one way to help you open your mind to thinking from a different perspective, to learning a different story than you've probably been told, and just starting to understand that there's a bigger perspective in terms of the way that we think about the world. So that's a good first step. That's an easy first step. So something like reading or doing a Google search and finding a book about the connections to the Native connections to Chicago, and learning more about the people who continue to call this land home. One really good one that I can recommend to folks is specifically about our community here in Chicago. And this is Imprints by Dr. John Lowe. He is a member of the Potawatomi Nation. And this book specifically talks about the Potawatomi connection to Chicago and what this looks like. So this is a great start in terms of helping you locate yourself within the history of this particular land. There are other ways too that you can learn more. So I actually love Google. I do not work for them, but they have a great search engine. So for questions like this, and if you feel so inclined, you can decide to make a donation to a Native serving organization. We have great organizations here in the city of Chicago who are doing really awesome work and helping to preserve and promote and continue to grow the Native community here within the city. Jump on the web and find an organization to make a donation to help them continue their work and to continue their mission. I personally, feel free to check out the Indian Center. I know they're doing good work. That's a great place to go. We're, having a conversation today about Thanksgiving. And I know that next week, many of you all are going to sit down at your tables. Another great way to bring a little decolonization into your Thanksgiving table is to learn a little bit more about foods that were and are native to this land. One of my favorite people to check out is named Sean Sherman, SeanSherman. He's known as the Sioux chef, not like the regular Sioux, like we're thinking in the kitchen, but Sioux is in his tribe, Sioux. And he just opened a restaurant in Minneapolis, and he only serves Native foods. It's incredible. He doesn't cook chicken. He doesn't cook beef. He doesn't cook, what is it? Chicken, beef, no dairy, and no cheese. All of those things.
Is fascinating.
And it's
fascinating.
It's amazing. But
Heather, oh my God. Heather, what is your favorite Native food?
Oh my gosh. This
Your
is
favorite.
book, by the way, in
Oh,
case you all
okay.
get
Yeah.
really excited and need to order his cookbook because it's awesome. So I have, and that's a great question, Carla. I have lots of favorite native foods, but one of my favorites, and this will also be on my Thanksgiving table, is very traditional. So within my tribe, we have a story about something that we, in our language, it's actually called our sustenance. It means like our everything. And the more, the bigger term that we often hear in larger society is the three sisters. So for us, those are corn, beans, and squash. They're called the three sisters. And they're called the three sisters because when you plant them, you plant all three of them together, and they require each one of their own being to help each one grow. They grow in partnership. The roots within each one of those plants help nourish other roots. One root provides nitrogen to the soil that the other plant needs. I mean, they've just got this really amazing, mutually beneficial relationship. And so that's why we call them the three sisters. Or that's part of the reason that we call them the three. There's lots of reasons why we call them the three sisters, but that's one of the reasons. So we know that these plants, you know, not only are they connected to us as people because they play incredibly large stories or incredibly major roles within our own traditional stories and within our traditional knowledge. They help frame, you know, our reference, but they also help guide our relationships and help us learn how to be in right relationship with other people, because they teach us how to live within people or with people who have differences amongst themselves. It teaches us that lesson. And so we know that, or when I sit down next Thursday at my table, I will absolutely have my corn, beans, and squash next to me to help celebrate that relationship and to remind me of who I come from and where I come from.
Heather, thank you so much. And I'm a foodie. So any conversation, I'm gonna take this in a whole nother direction if we don't get off the food conversation. But Heather, thank you so much. Anthony, would you like to open the floor?
Yeah, it's just so sustenance. It feels like sustenance to hear you set the record straight. It's just, thank you for taking us back to fourth grade and correcting the fallacy. And I know that I want to know more. And really, I want to ask you about a lot of people don't know about the two treaties of Chicago. And it's another sad story, but I'm just so curious to hear your perspective on that sad time when our Native people were ultimately driven out of Chicago. I don't know, you know, we research we can, but the opportunity to sit in the front row of your classroom is pretty great. Could you share a little bit about, for those that aren't familiar with the treaty, the 1820 and 1821 or 22, can you tell us a little bit about the treaties of Chicago?
Sure. So I want to back up a little tiny bit just for some context, because
Please.
I feel like we definitely use words that I feel like people hear a lot and may not necessarily have a great foundational context in terms of what that looks like. So I know that we hear treaties a lot when we talk about tribal nations and tribal people. That's a very important that's a very important concept within tribal communities, because they're very important documents on some level. Oh, this is going to be, there's so many nuances here. I'm trying not to go into too many nuances, but for the most part, treaties are government documents that specifically state relationships between nations. So, the United States can have treaties with France. They can have treaties with, with Ethiopia. They can have treaties with, other countries, these kind of things. They are just documents that help define relationships. So within that then means that the treaty, that document, that recognizes that there's an authority within those two powers who are making that treaty, who are signing that document. So on some level, a treaty is a government document acknowledging that Native tribes are sovereign nations. That means that they have a political relationship within the government of the United States. That's really important. So I'm going to say that again. This means that Native people, although, oftentimes we're classified as a race, yeah, we're a race, but ultimately we are political entities because we have a sovereign relationship with the United States, because the United States government offered and signed treaties with our Native nations. So ultimately, that's what it means. It means that we are sovereign. It recognizes that we have the ability to self-govern, to create our own laws, to create our own infrastructure, and to create our own economic systems to help support our people. Okay, so that's ultimately what a treaty means. So when Illinois was becoming a state, and Illinois would have become a state actually through the Treaty of Greenville, which the Treaty of Greenville sold off basically that helped sell off the Ohio River Valley to the United States government. So that kicked all the rest of the natives out of the Ohio River Valley, forced them to Indian country, and that at that time was what was known as Oklahoma. So all the tribes that were left in Ohio got relocated, forced relocated. So forced relocation also, we can think of that as what a lot of you heard in school as a trail of tears. It's a trail of death. It was literally a march from one location to another location at gunpoint, oftentimes in really awful, ugly weather conditions. Lots of people died because we were forced to relocate from places. So the Treaty of Greenville sold off the Ohio River Valley, which then created the states that we now know as Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and I believe that also went to Iowa, but I'm not sure. I totally have to fact check myself on this. So then once we get what is now known as Illinois, centered as a state, then the state itself can then start making treaties through the federal government to help remove its Indians. So then we know that the Potawatomis were one of the last groups within that confederacy to still have a stronghold here. Those two treaties of Chicago, they both are made in relationships with the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi folks, but ultimately those treaties moved all of those natives out of what we now know as Illinois, and specifically Chicago. So that meant no more Indians here in the city. Then, ironically, now let's fast forward about 150 years, or I think about 100 years, and now we are in the period of the 1950s and 60s, where the federal government is still trying to figure out how to kill Indians and how to take care of the Indian problem. And so they decide that if we move Indians from the reservation into cities, that it'll be easier for them to forget their culture and forget their heritage and to just not be Indian anymore. So we've got the Relocation Act. So then, we've got these two treaties in the early 1800s that move all the Indians out. Well, then 1950s, the federal government says, let's bring them back to the cities. So that's where we start seeing what we now have as this contemporary place with over 100 natives from 100 different tribal nations, all because of that Federal Relocation Act, moving Indians back here. So we know that we've got, we all claim this area now as our home, as our land, but it does come with this long baggage and this long history of why we're here. And those reasons, really at the core of it are to kill us, are to get rid of us, are to remove us as human beings, as people.
Thank you for erasing the ignorance. And I can only imagine how difficult it is to have so much grace and generosity. Thank you so much. Marcus?
So Heather, I don't want to step over the last few words that you spoke. They reach to the bottom of the well of my soul, and to be at the effect of erasure, even in this moment in which we breathe air together. So this business about caste systems that banish people, that diminish people, is not a historical thing. It's a right now thing. And I feel you there. And there's a bit of outrage in me right now that I've got to do some processing, to maybe some drinking, maybe even go get some tobacco and send up some smoke, to let this spirit go. So first of all, yeah, with Anthony, thank you for your grace, your charm, your insight, but more importantly, for your gentle resistance. And I stand in resistance with you, and I'm willing to stand with you, even in our eventual event being vanquished. It'll have to be over our dead bodies, if you know what I mean, kind of thing. And it need not be. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and then finally, I would have us consider our complicity with an illegitimate government on these lands, right? And the illegitimacy of ownership of the lands. I know this is heretical from a mainstream point of view, but for sure, a wrong is continuing to be perpetrated under our nose and with our permission, and in exchange for our comfort. And I'm just not willing to be comfortable anymore about this. So I pledge my solidarity. Full stop.
Because of when we're one oppressed, we're all oppressed. And as we move forward in our journeys for equity, we have to recognize that we have to have solidarity in our BIPOC community, because one person's oppression is everyone's oppression. Exactly. Heather, thank you so much for coming to speak. I'm literally about to cry. Thank you so much. And now we have to go somewhere and eat some squash.
So, but I will say this. Let's leave on one happy note. The fact that, and Marcus, I'm thank you so much for those words, because I feel like this is the way to kind of wrap that up a little bit. You know, every day is literally an act of resistance. The fact that I'm alive, the fact that I have 2 younger sisters, the fact that my family continues as a Native family, the fact that I can learn my language, the fact that I can practice what little bit of tradition I can continue to practice, that is my everyday resistance. That is the way that we continue that. And so all of you as allies, you know, we're Native people are a small minority because we continue to live in genocide. This genocide is not stopped against who we are. You know, you can look at many different, you know, find me on Facebook. I'm actually done taking a Facebook break, so you can now find me back on Facebook, and you know, you can follow up with me for answers to certain questions or access to different resources about Native communities. I'm always happy to send people in the right direction, but really this needs to be your moment of action. Figure out a way to help us, our tiny little community, continue to live out our days of personal resistance, you know, by being our Native selves, by being able to practice the work that we do, by being able to practice our language, our traditions. And that goes for all of us, for all of our communities who have suffered in trauma and due to the system of oppression. So let's all support one another in terms of how we every day live out these little personal acts of resistance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anthony Moseley.
Thank you so much, Heather. Wow. I have a script. Let me find it. I wasn't ready. Heather hypnotized me with her incredible grace and sharing. Thank you that's our show. Thank you for joining us, and please join us on our Becoming Our Active Anti-Racist workshop on December 7th, which will be exploring difficult dinner conversations with the family over the holidays. And Heather, you know, gave us a lot of good content to share over the holidays. Let's keep the energy going. And then on December 16th, we're going to have our year in review Crucial Connection show. And I think we should find a clip of Heather and echo her voice on that show. Go to collaboraction.org for more information and sign up for those shows. And stick around. We have a video we're going to show tonight of Geronimo Speaks, who was one of our guests last month, sharing a poem inspired by a poem from Gwendolyn Brooks. And we'll put that link also in the chat. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our past Crucial Connection shows. There's a lot of great stuff there.
Wow. Thank you so very much for this amazing, insightful space holding experience we had here, Heather. This program and all the programming really on Collaborations Together Network is made possible by the support from our sponsors, AV Chicago, the Mark and Jeannie Malnati Foundation, the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation, and people just like you who make a one-time donation at collaboraction.org or sign up to be a member.
Be a member. Well, we did it, Carla. We put another one in the world. Thank you all for joining us on Crucial Connections. Thank you, Heather Miller. Great stuff. Here we are, hyper local, thinking global, and dismantling oppression of all forms. Have a wonderful night, everyone, and please let's all just take this show to heart and see how we can manifest some better change and support our First Nations whose land we are on. Thank you all. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.